I'm here with Ross Bennett, Head of Performance. Again, today we're going to have a look at the max speed, max velocity work. Ross, this is different than the acceleration, deceleration, change of direction that you've previously done blogs and vlogs on. We're now moving on to the max speed work.
Yeah, definitely is. And obviously, I think it's fair to say it's different in the way we're doing it, adapting with the time. So before we were sitting next to each other, it was quite nice. Now we're remote. So yeah, different screens. But yeah, so this is the third one in the series, Kiers, that we obviously would have liked to have got done a lot quicker in the series. But now we're getting round to the third one, the max velocity, which obviously is going to cover the last part of the locomotive skills that we've produced.
Yeah, so great. So all the blogs and vlogs are already up on the website. We've got an offer there at the moment for new members. We're looking to push it out into S&C coaches and sports scientists, get involved from the GA world, the football world, the hurling world. Some great content up there at the moment. So Ross, you're going to take us through the max speed work. Can you give us a bit of an introduction first about how max speed work differs than acceleration and change of direction and everything?
Yeah, for sure, Kiers. And like we spoke in all the other locomotive stuff, there is obviously some crossover between different characteristics, but that's fine. I guess max velocity work and max speed work is essentially getting a player up to their max speed. So I think of it in really simple terms in distances. Acceleration phase goes up to 15 meters, roughly, depending on the individual. Now we're looking at 30, 40, 50 meters even, making it really contextual to the sport, but also to the distance that you want to develop.
Yeah, so are there any other differences then from just working on acceleration in terms of max speed? So there's the distances. So you as a coach then, you're going to be telling the players that if you're setting up a max speed drill, it's just in terms of setting up 40 meters or 50 meters, correct?
In its purest form, yeah. Obviously, there's different drills we can do to supplement, let's say, running mechanics, which we'll talk about in a little bit, in a bit more detail. But essentially, then the distance will dictate the type of running it is. And if you're telling an athlete or a player to go maximal for 40, 50 meters, yes, there's a phase of acceleration in there, of course, for the first 10, 15 meters. But then you're becoming into your max speed running style, which is essentially this sort of skill we're looking to develop more.
Yeah, so just on that then, so the coaching points are different, aren't they? Obviously, you're going to be looking at different aspects of the running style. Can you just go into a little bit about the big difference between acceleration over 10 to 20 meters versus max speed over 30 all the way up to 60, 70 meters?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's important that we revisit the acceleration stuff just so we get a little bit of context. But of course, when you're accelerating, you're going from either like a standing still or very low velocity in terms of the speed you're moving at, and you're trying to get to quickly as quick as you can, essentially trying to move quicker within a certain time frame. So you have to start to change your body to be able to enable yourself to do that. So things like producing force horizontally. So that's why we encourage players to lean forward as much as they can within their capabilities. They spend a little bit longer on the ground in the first acceleration phase when they're ground striking because they need to generate force with the ground. So you'll see more choppier steps, but you'll also see steps that are potentially more higher into ground contact time. So ground contact time is longer. When you then shift into closer to your max velocity and you start to hit your peak speed, you'll see a change in the mechanics naturally in the player. So they'll become more upright, which is fine, because what happens then is once you've accelerated to your maximum speed, it's all about maintenance of your speed. So yes, we can still accelerate and get faster in a top speed running style, but the whole point of it is that you want to get players to be able to produce the required force quickly on the ground. So contact time's really quick, and you see more of a cyclical nature. So quite an upright stance, quite a quickness movement of the legs, and you get quite a lot of stiffness on the ground as well. So you get this real forward lean to accelerate and longer on the ground and more choppy steps. So when a player comes more upright, and it's about trying to maintain that speed with really short time frames, enabling them to do it with quick contacts on the ground.
That links on quite well then to the gym work, doesn't it? Because in some ways, maximizing your acceleration ability, deceleration ability, where there's huge ground contact, forces, ground reaction forces, and greater contact time is one specific part of the gym work, and then your max speed work is kind of entering into a different aspect of your gym work.
Yeah, 100%. So, like you said, in terms of the first initial, we spoke about this briefly in the previous vlog, it's more around, concentric power, concentric strength, getting athletes really strong to be able to produce force on the ground. Now it becomes more about stiffness, and so plyometrics are really prevalent here, really important. So quite high stress plyos in terms of bounding. Obviously, it depends on the athlete's capability, and you would take them through being able to land, being able to jump effectively first. But ultimately, you're taking them through a series of, whether it will be pogos, whether it be small hurdle jumps, whether it be big hurdle jumps, bilateral, unilateral. But your real coaching cue is to get contact time as small as it can, because that's going to have the greatest transfer to maintaining your max speed or within that kind of running mechanic.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I saw some stats as regards in football and in GA as well. The average distance for your sprint is very, very short. It's only 10 meters, it's 15 meters. Now, a lot of times that will be from a flying start, but actually those max speed works in the game are often related to the critical moments in the match. So getting in and getting the goal, or sprinting back and recovering in defender. So it's a real important aspect of performance, isn't it?
100%. And like you say, it might only happen 2 or 3 times, but you're right, in that instance that it does happen, it's typically a moment where, I don't know, you're either out of balance in a position and you've got where there's a bit of space to be exploited in the invasion game, or you're exploiting that space in an attacker. Performance, obviously, then you have to create that kind of worst case scenario, but you also have to make sure they're exposed to that for them from a performance point of view, but also from an injury point of view as well, because the biggest injury, especially in the GAA, would be hamstring, or one of the biggest injuries would be hamstring. And because players aren't conditioned enough to run at their max velocity and do it repeatedly when needed, especially certain positions, the midfielders who are up and down all the time. In soccer, you've got the fullbacks, the wingers maybe on a recovery run, or depending on where they are on the pitch. So position specific, but you're right, you have to prepare the players for the performance side, but also the injury side as well.
Okay, so it's performance and injury basis then. So can you give a little bit of detail of what do we actually mean when we say max speed work, and also then how many times per week are you looking to hit your max speed or close to that percentage?
Yeah, there's a lot of differences in opinions within practitioners and even research. It's quite running faster, max speed development's been around for years, but actually making sure we condition our players enough and what percentage we need to condition them is something that's quite a hot topic. We like to use anywhere between 85% and above, but ideally, if you're looking really to get them, you're trying to get them as close to 100% as you can, or even past 100% if you're looking to improve performance. So when we do our max speed work, the minimum requirement is 85% as a speed exposure, but we're looking to get them as close to 100%, if not further on the odd occasion, to try and get a new max speed. So we would do this in season where you've got weekly games. The game would typically bring out a max speed exposure minimum of 1 to 2 for 85% of players. Couple of positions, obviously the goalkeeper wouldn't get one in a game, 2 centre halves, a touch and go depending on the situation. Everybody else would typically get a speed exposure in a game, but then you're looking for those players then to at least do 1 more session a week, which is focused on speed. And for the players that didn't get that speed exposure, the question is then, when do you try to get that exposure? Because they still played a full game or maybe a full game. It seems to me incorrect morally and also physiologically to try and get them to sprint then after a game because they haven't hit it. So you're definitely looking for 1 to 2 exposures a week. If they get it in a game, then definitely 2.
You'd prefer the approach then to actually those guys who haven't played or haven't played much, get them into the dressing room after the game, get them home, and then in the following days get their speed exposure or get their conditioning at least in that period then?
Yeah, I think if it's a person that hasn't played or they've only played 15, 20 minutes, then I think it's fine to do so on the day. If it's someone then that's played 90 minutes, for example, a centre half, but he hasn't hit his speed because of the context of the game, then I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it on that day. You might still wait till Tuesday, for example, and then he does speed work Tuesday, Thursday.
Okay, interesting. What do you think then about, so there, a lot of athletics coaches have started to come into the professional football world and into the GA world as well, where they're coming in and doing some speed mechanic work on one hand, but also like a lot of marching and A skips and B skips and stuff like that. Is there a place for that?
Yeah, there is a place. There is. I'm thinking out loud here because I've got mixed views on this, and it changes all the time. There's definitely a place, and I think that if you're trying to, like we did in the other qualities, we're trying to create shapes and we're trying to give the athletes little pointers and more efficient ways of moving in certain scenarios. So I do think the A skips, the B skips are good for just scaffolding, like we spoke about before, scaffolding certain patterns and shapes that you want them to hit when they're running in certain phases. But I have to say, I don't think there's much transfer to the sprinting itself. And I know there's an ideal kind of technical model that you want to create for performance and for injury. But I have to stress, I don't think I've seen much change in any player that I've worked with across all the phases and all the years in his technical model. We've definitely seen changes in his speed and his development, and coming from whether that's gym-based work transferring to actually him running fast or her running fast on the pitch. But I'm not sure on the transfer of these sort of kind of closed running mechanic skills that you would find in athletics to the performance. And maybe that's because we don't have the time to spend on it repetitively, whereas in athletics, that's going to be part of their daily routine. We're trying to develop so many different qualities and different fitness aspects that we might only touch upon it once a week, twice a week maybe. So there's lots of variables, but at the moment, I'm not sure. And it'd be really good to get a real good dialogue around this sort of stuff between practitioners as well.
Yeah, in Gaelic games and especially in professional football, it's very much a skill-based sport, isn't it? And like you mentioned, there are so many different aspects that you need to work on. We did a video and a podcast a few days ago just about the four-corner approach of technical, tactical, physical, psychosocial, emotional, mentality. There's so many aspects, whereas in athletics, ultimately, you have to run very fast from A to B. And that's the only thing you need to take care of alongside psychosocial and everything like that. But it's a little bit different in the team sports, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And also, if you think of like an athletic, say a sprinter, his technical element is his technical running style. Whereas in a sport like this, the technical side is actually the technique of receiving the ball, different ball skills. So their whole goal is to make sure that running style and the speed is at the top of their game. Whereas in football, there's so many things that someone could run really fast, but his control could be horrendous, or he can't do what is required positionally. He doesn't have understanding of where he should be on the pitch. So it's irrelevant that he can actually run maximally. So you have to spread the time evenly to where it's suited to the player and also to that team.
Yeah. Now, are you saying then that by the time you come to being a youth, an under 18 or adult player, you can't get faster? Like, surely there are still ways, obviously, we're trying to maximize that person's speed, aren't we?
Yeah, and 100%. Of course, you can get faster, and that's our job as well, to make them as physically reaching their potential as they can, as physically hitting their peak as high as we can get them. But I think we do it in different ways. I don't think we're going to necessarily get massive increases through lots of different technical A skip, B skip type drills. I think we have to focus on actually making them physiologically better. So the work you're doing in the gym, so strength, power work was the base, and then like we spoke about, the stiffness and the higher level plyometrics, alongside the conditioning for the hamstrings, in particular for sprinting, but also then actually putting them in scenarios where they're actually running fast and understanding that their technical model might not be when you compare it to a top level sprinter. Although very interesting picture came out from Ciaran, rugby strength coach on Twitter, around Usain Bolt this week, and kind of looked at his first 6 steps, and technically they was so poor compared to the model sprinting. So I think we have to be careful of what we're looking for in the players. For me, if it's safe, if the technical model is safe, then and they're quite good in terms of performance, then I don't think we need to tinker too much. But of course, we can get them faster. We run them on the pitch in terms of getting them exposed to velocity, the right amount of higher velocity work in the week. We do the gym work, and you're confident over time they're going to get quicker and develop.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was an interesting point that the rugby strength coach made, wasn't it? It challenges people's thinking about what is the perfect model. It's like the age-old saying of that, if you want to get faster, run fast, isn't it? Do repetitions. That links on then. So is there a place in underage, so in schoolboys or underage kids, is there a place for technical model and coaching points? Do you just do fun races with them? Is there any point in doing max speed? Is that a possibility at that age? Or what would your approach be?
Yeah, I think with the young ones, so I mean, we're quite fortunate here at the club, QPR, that we have the young ones from 9s to 11s, 12s, what we call the foundation phase. And I think with those guys, you don't touch them with any technical drill or detail. You just put them in different races that expose them to different distances. So you get them really moving in loads of different ways. And hopefully they're starting to kind of figure out their different running styles. And also you have to remember that kids of that age aren't going to have much strength. So they're going to adopt quite an upright running style from practically the first 2 steps. So you're coaching around acceleration and leaning forward and good contact on the ground. It becomes irrelevant for the young kids because they haven't got the physiology to do it. So you're just giving them lots of different variation, but you are exposing them 100% to 30 meters, 40 meters, which to them is relatively quite a long distance. When you then get into your growth spurt, so what we call the youth development phase over here, but around 13, 14, 15, then yes, I think because coordination is compromised and because people are getting taller, they're getting maybe a little bit weaker, their limbs are stretching, you have to then expose them to some coordination type running drills that just reminds them of basic coordination and simple things of just walking marches. But you can do it in quite a fun way as well. It doesn't have to be straight line, and they're still kids, they still need variation, they still need engagement. But you would start to introduce some sort of running mechanics, but not too much, just to give them an idea. And then you might give them some pointers of when they're actually doing their runs, their faster runs. And then that kind of leads you into kind of the top end YDP, PDP, where things become a bit more about performance. And again, things that we spoke about, the gym work's essential, getting them to run fast, but tracking how much they're running fast over the week. And also some technical detail around the sprinting, max sprinting as well.
Okay, great. Last question then. I'm a coach, for instance, and I say that, well, I only want to do my players' max speed work with the ball. What's the point in getting them sprinting? They're not sprinters. We're not athletics. We're football, and I just want to introduce the ball all the time and work on our max speed.
Yeah, it's something that we come across, quite a bit amongst technical coaches. The one thing I always say to technical coaches is that if you actually look at how many times the player is actually on the ball in whatever sport throughout the whole game, it's actually very, very minimal compared to when they're off it. Around, off the top of my head, trying to go across many sports, 5%, sometimes even lower, 1 to 5%, depending on the player. So they are going to have to run without the ball in so many different contexts, whether it's movement off the ball, whether it's tracking a runner, whether it's creating space for someone else, whether the ball's been slid in and he's got to get himself onto the ball or herself onto the ball. There's so many scenarios where they're going to have to run without the ball. So I think you need to look at them in 2 different skills. I think you have to make sure they can run and the skill of running is developed and practiced, but also the ability to run fast with the ball, especially in certain positions, is important, especially in Gaelic when the mechanics become massively different because every 4 steps you have to hop or solo. So it is important to do stuff with the ball, but it's also important to understand that you have to isolate that skill and work on max speed as well.
Okay, brilliant. We'll move on to some of the technical drills and practices that you've come up with. Just remember, for people, subscribe to our podcast, our new podcast, The Locker Room. You'll find it on all different podcasts, websites and Apple Podcasts. As well, head over to the website, deelysportscience.com. Lots of good offers up there at the moment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm here with Ross Bennett, Head of Performance of QPR Academy and DSS. Ross, you're just going to run through a few little practices to work on max speed work.
Yeah, we're just going to, so we just spoke about a bit of theory and just a few little things around it. I'm just going to give some ideas on different ways that you can develop this, because I think I think coaches will be able to get their players to run fast over 40, 50 meters. That's an important part of it. But then we can maybe show them different ways to make it more game specific or challenge the max speed work in different ways.
Okay, great. Right. So let's run through a few.
Perfect. Okay, so if you remember the continuum, I know it's been a while since we've released the last vlog, but we work off a continuum when we're developing these skill sets of closed, making things then more open and reactive, and then chaos. Now, with max speed, it's not as easy, let's say, as change of direction and agility to fit into that continuum, because essentially you still need them to run fast, and you don't want to compromise that too much. But I'm going to give some examples on here of how we can take them through the continuum. The first one is I'm sure everyone, I don't want to make people suck eggs, but it's a very simple one to make it close skill, is that you just simply have whatever distance you want to work on, you just have a straight runway. We call it a max speed runway. So this might give you some different ideas. So
well, we call it the Heathrow Express runway.
Yeah, we did call that. I think you nicked this off Leicester, I think, originally. And then so we have to give Leicester a shout out, and then we changed it to
Matt Reeves, I think we nicked it from Leicester City. They went on to win the Premier League. So yeah, I think it's a good source to take it from. But
and we started using it, and QPR got relegated, I think.
Exactly.
Okay, so yeah, but it's really, really simple, but it just makes it slightly different to a typical run from A to B, because it gives the players a little bit more focus. So we typically do this in terms of distances. So you've got a 10 meter, can you see that okay, kids?
Yeah.
So you've got a 10 meter acceleration phase. You've got a 40 meter, what we call a max speed phase, maintenance phase. And we've got a 10 meter decel phase. Now, we can stretch this out. So if you've got players who are very good at accelerating, and they're not going to be close to 85, 90% or close to 100% after 10 meters, which you probably will have, you can stretch that out to 15, 20, so that by the time they get into their phase, they're pretty close to their max speed. But the whole point is that they run fast from point A here. They've got different phases so they can just see visually where they're running, an acceleration phase. And then when they're in this phase, then if they hit their reach max speed or their peak speed, you're asking them to maintain it for that period. And this is where you can tell them about the difference in technical models. And in this phase, you want to become a bit more upright. Your posture's nice and tall. You want to strike under center of mass. You want to be springy off the ground. They're the kind of key technical points you're talking about in there. And then you give them a 10 meter deceleration phase, because we still think that decel is important, but you don't want to challenge them too much after they're sprinting for 50 meters. So we think 10 meters is quite ample for the amount of distance they've sprinted. And we've just put this, or we're going to put this drill up on the website for the resource as well, so people can see Ciaran running really fast in the max speed mode.
Ross, what kind of repetitions or sets and recovery time are you looking at then?
Yeah, so if you're going for max speed gears, then essentially you want quite a long recovery time in between. But I see students and I see academics, talk about 3-4 minutes. Now, textbook recovery time, yes, you need 4 minutes to make sure that neural system's completely recovered, etc., etc. But we have to be realistic. If we're doing, I don't know, one set of 6, for example, of a max speed, and you're having 4 minutes rest in between, 35, 40 minutes of the session gone, plus you've got to do your technical work, etc. So you have to be really realistic in how you're going to fit this in. So I just make it simple in terms of max speed. You run the rep there, you walk on the way back, slowly on the way back, so you feel recovered. Your heart rate's kind of come down to fairly normal, 80, 90 beats, still going to be a little bit elevated. And then when they're ready to go again, they go again. So, and normally we do warm-up sets, but one set of 5 max runs would be more than enough. You'd probably do 2-3 warm-up ones. 5, that's quite high level sprint session in the team sports. If you only get 2 or 3 maximum reps, you're still going to get a good 120 to 150 meters high speed running, probably 100 meters of sprint distance as well. So more than enough, I think. It's
important to mention as well, Ross, that this is not a conditioning drill, isn't it not? Like this is a locomotive quality or a skill that you're working on. So like you're not looking to really beast players and improve their conditioning and fitness in this.
No, and that's a really good point, and it's about the quality of the run. So if you give them like only work to rest, if you do an RSA protocol where your work to rest is 1 to 6, then the quality and the speed of the run is going to be really low. It's not going to be. It's probably going to be. You could probably maintain 85% maybe if you're quite well conditioned, but you're not going to have the speed that you need to really develop this skill. But just on that point, Kears, when we introduce players back into the rehab and we start to increase their speed on the pitch in their rehab program, you can actually do a work to rest of 1 to 6 at a certain speed. So you do get some conditioning of hamstrings and high speed running. But when you're looking then to develop their max speed, then you come off the work to rest ratio and you give them enough recovery that allows them to feel fresh and ready to sprint again.
Yeah. What period of the training session would you be looking to do this in a normal team setting, not in a rehab? So at the beginning when they're completely fresh, before, just after the warm up or after a passing practice, or at the end of a session?
Yeah, I think it has to be at the first part of the session. Now, in terms of the way you work and the way different people work within their teams might be slightly different. For example, at London, when we worked together, we always did some technical work as part of the warm-up. So we had a closed skill or even whatever hand passing drill it was, kick passing drill with a physical warm-up within the first kind of 10, 15 minutes. And then we would go into this work. So you make sure they're fully warm, they do warm-up runs, etc. Yeah. Or if you work very traditional in the sense that you have the first 10, 15 minutes with the sports science S&C, then you do it within that first part. But you wouldn't really do this at the end of training. I think that if they trained hard enough and it's been a fairly taxing session, the injury risk is obviously higher and the quality of the speed you're going to get is going to be lower.
Okay, great. So moving on then to more open skill and reactive skill, it gets trickier, doesn't it?
Yeah, before we go to that though, Kears, I just want to talk about something that we've introduced this year and something I think that's quite prevalent in the sprinting world and development, and talking about not just running in straight lines and talking about this curve running concept. Because if you think about a lot of the running that players would do within their game scenario, it's probably not going to be always in a straight line. They're going to have to make good angles. They're going to have to curve the run, whether it's beating the offside track, whether in Gaelic it's running in behind, you're not making it predictable, or you're moving to receive the ball. It's not always going to be as simple as straight line running. So I've just put a couple of scenarios that we've done in terms of what we're filming and got coming up onto the website. We just, obviously, you still need to keep the speed high, right? So you can do this however you want to do this on a pitch. Let's just say, so start position A, start position B, and you literally, so same principles apply in terms of distance, and you're just seeing whether they can maintain their kind of max speed, similar to a 200-meter bend. If you think of the first bend, you just kind of, but maybe a little bit smaller distances, around 40, 50 meters. You're just seeing whether they can maintain good speed, but also manipulate their body. So they're having to lean a little bit while still in this technical element, because it is a different skill. So not too fussed on the technical detail of how they lean, but it's just putting them in scenarios that they can practice this skill. And then that can kind of be progressed on to obviously more aggressive cuts and stuff that we've done here, where you can have kind of a U-turn. And again, this will be measured out to be properly, or you can make it random, it's entirely up to you. And you're just getting them to lean around the bend as they're running. So just a couple of different ideas. You've got a C run, if you like, there over a larger distance, and you've got a U run there as well. So, and obviously you need to do it off both sides. So you're challenging them off both sides. And if you do it yourself, it's actually quite an interesting concept of trying to maintain your speed and curving around the bend. So that's probably the next one I just want to speak about, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. A really good one as well you can do potentially is chasing games, can't you? Like around the curve where one person starts off 2 meters ahead of the other, and they're like, that's really high-end max speed work then, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's where you kind of take it to more reactive and kind of chaotic, even though you know that you're going to start there and finish there. You're going off the player's speed, and that's when you're going to really hit their peak speeds. Because if you get the matchups right and you get people at similar speeds, the competitive in the players is going to drive that speed a little bit more. So 100% you're correct. You definitely would start a session on here, maybe the first week. You start here so that they get used to the movement, and it's probably something new, same as that really. And then you can add in a race or a partner chase where you give someone 1 meter head start and they've got to try and chase him down.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Any other practice then to mention?
No, I think we'll keep it there for now. Obviously,
Yep.
people can get as creative as they want with the
Yeah.
curves, and you can do circle runs, but you just have to make sure that if it's for max speed, that the speed doesn't drop too much. So if the circle's too tight, that's a really good game and a really fun exercise, but it probably won't hit the max speed and the condition of the hamstrings and the exposures you want. So it's just understanding exactly what you want out of the session.
Yeah, and you have to be careful, don't you, as regards reactive, open, chaotic, max speed, because if you think of it, if you have a player sprinting in reaction to another player, if he's constantly changing direction all the time, he may not be actually hitting his max speed then, or over 85%, 90%, 95% of max speed. So sometimes actually in training, like locomotive skill development, getting them running like from point A to point B as fast as they can in a straight line or in a curved line or with somebody chasing is actually enough, isn't it? You may not need to go further than that.
No, and we'll go on to kind of the end of the spectrum in a minute to give some examples of how you can maybe make things more realistic to the game but still get the physical outcome. And I think that's the important thing to mention, that when we're looking at max speed development, we are looking for that physical outcome. So if you make it too random, you won't always get the outcome that you want, or the physical outcome that you want. But that's okay, as long as you understand that the outcome might be a different one for that session.
It's the same as every bit of coaching, isn't it? As long as you have the outcome and that's the outcome that you want to achieve, then you focus on that. And you the other little chaotic games are fantastic in a box, but that's looking at something else.
Yeah, 100%. And that's just having your coaching hat on and having small doses of something, but having the main focus you want to work on as well. Just 1 minute, kids. I'll just quickly jump onto the last two ones, just so they can see the progression here. So like you were speaking about, trying to make it closer to that end of the continuum as we can, still having the element of max speed in. I've got two different ones that I quite like. I've got one that's lateral, so you have two players in the middle there, and those cones can be about 6 meters. That can be quite short, but it doesn't matter how wide they are. 6 to 10 meters, 4 to 8 meters, it doesn't matter. Just a distance there that's not too large, so no more than 10 meters. And then you have a cone that is ideally 40 meters away, because we're still trying to get the distance that we want to get for the high speed running and for the max speed development. And if you remember, the members remember my favorite drill, one of my favorite drills of all time, the mirror drill. We start off with the mirror drill here. So you have 1 and 2. Number ones are trying to lose number twos in here. So now you're bringing it closer at the start of the drill to the game itself. And you can progress that on to making people breaking lines or transition where the partners become defending, attacking, etc. But essentially, that first 5-10 seconds becomes a bit more chaos and a bit more or closer to the game itself. But then after the cues, so either the coach cues or the player decides when they want to go, then they've got to run to either side, left or right, and the partner has to follow it. So you're getting two kind of elements there, and you're still, because it's chasing and because it's a bit more random and because you're having to chase someone else, you're definitely trying to get the speed exposure, but it's closer to the game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, that's good, because you're making a game specific at the beginning, and they're trying to lose the other player in close proximity, and then you're darting out to the side and reacting. And if you think of in football, in Gaelic games, that happens a lot, doesn't it? There's a lot of physical contact, and all of a sudden then you're sprinting off to get away, and the defending player is like chasing afterwards.
Exactly. It's very, very realistic and similar to what you'd have in a game. Now, the one point I would say here is, in the mirror drill, we would work for 30, 35 seconds at a time. Because you still want the max speed element, you can only do that for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, absolute max, because it's very fatiguing, it's very tiring. So you work here, so you get your quality of work here and a little bit of a true agility. And then when the player decides to go, or when you blow the whistle, then they have to sprint. So it's just making sure that you get them variables right so that you get the outcomes you want.
Okay. Great.
And then the last one then, Gears, and last one on the continuum is very similar. So it's 1v1, but this time, let me just see if this blueprint works. This time we work not laterally, but we work in like a 10-meter box here. And you have one player here, So I try to put this into pitch geography within the players' positions. So you'd have an attacking base player starting the drill. Obviously they'd switch around, but I think you draw the attention to the relevant points that they're going to need in their game. So
Ross, can you just make that a little bit bigger below that, just so that we can kind of see that little box?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of just make this bigger.
Yeah, just so people can see it a little bit better.
Perfect.
So, I know these virtual vlogs and podcasts and everything is trickier, challenging.
They're always harder, right? Is that a bit better, Piers?
Yeah, perfect.
So you've got these ones coloured in green as the cones. And then you've got attacking player, player 1, and player 2, which is the X. Now, essentially, what you do here is I normally give a period of time. So I don't really tell them when they're going to go to start with, because I want to make it a bit reactive for both of them as well. But essentially, number 1 is trying to move number X, but he's trying to do it in a way that he's kind of moving forward. Sometimes he might come back, sometimes he might side shuffle. It's completely random. And player X is getting into good defensive principles. So he's got to get touch tight, he's nice and low. And that's where the interlink then with the principles of play and the technical coaches come in, because they're looking at their 1v1 defending. But then on the go, you've got 40 metres away, you've got another line, and you've basically, the player 1 has got to run beyond player 2, and 2's got to spin off the shoulder and run with him. So the skill that he's getting as a defender now, and an attacker to break his line, and the defender has to spin off the shoulder like they would in a game in any sport, and the ball goes over their head, and then it's a race through to this line. And you can progress that on to where the attacker is in complete control, where he can go whenever he wants. So he has to try and lose his man for whatever time he wants to, and then he runs beyond them. So that's just kind of how we maybe take it along the continuum and make it more specific to the game to get a few more outcomes. But the focus is definitely on trying to get the speed exposures and trying to develop their max speed in a very contextual way.
Yeah, I like that, because you've gone from closed skill to open skill with a bit of reactive aspects to it into more chaotic match specific situations, but without ever compromising the outcome of you want to get these players moving fast and over bigger distances, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's important, especially in sport like we work in day to day, in terms of it's very technical, it's very tight, but the game is quite expansive at times. So we have to make sure at least once a week we have, within the buzzword of tactical periodization, a focused drill, and drills that allow the players to explore space, because the game is very prevalent with small-sided games and etc. Whereas I found with the Gaelic, when we worked in the Gaelic, a lot of the games are actually quite larger, and it's actually maybe manipulating those to be a little bit smaller at times for not overloading them and to avoid injuries, etc. So you're 100% right. You have to expose them to this speed, otherwise it becomes something different.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Thanks as always, Ross. Very insightful, huge experience and knowledge to bring to the arena of sports science and S&C, and also into coaching. So thanks as always. If you're a member, make sure you're getting up on the WhatsApp group, get in contact with us. Also, our podcast, The Locker Room, is out there now, so you can access that on all the usual podcast platforms. Make sure you go over and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for people who aren't members yet, go on over to dailysportscience.com. There's a really good offer there at the moment, and get involved in the conversation. So again, Ross, thanks very much.
Thanks, Kiers. I hope the virtual one works okay. Seems to go okay. But yeah, no, cheers, guys. Thank you very much, and we'll speak soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ross. No, it worked very well. Okay, well done. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time.